Good morning, everybody. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. So, we're going to continue on with Lillian Moret's testimony today, but I have most certainly, yesterday, found the remaining documents that I was looking for to kind of corroborate some of the assertions that John Armstrong made that nobody could verify. So, Armstrong came out and he had said that on the 16th of April, 1953, that policewoman Felicia Spritzer, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's spelled all weird. It's got a P and an F and an S and a Z and a T in there. Pfitzer made the arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald on the 16th, and that her unit, which was a Brooklyn-based unit, were credited with taking him into custody. That is blatantly fucking false. Blatantly false. So actually, I wasn't gonna, but I'm gonna have to go ahead and pull up my fucking notes because it's important enough to note yet another thing that Armstrong got wrong. I'm trying not to fault him too much because his underlying thesis is correct, right? So when it comes to the fucking fine details, some things fell through the cracks with him. But but the most important thing is the date, April the 16th, and this is pretty universally recognized as the date that Oswald was picked up. So this is how this went down because there's been a lot of confusion. There was an attendance officer from another district, District 22. Oswald's school in the Bronx is in District 24, okay? Even though it's PS 117, it's in District 24 in the Bronx. But we have Victor J. Connell, who's an attendance officer in 22nd District. He's the one that picked up Oswald at the Bronx Zoo and returned him to school. That, I believe, was in March. And Diana, that photograph of Oswald, that is absolutely 100% the Bronx Zoo and not New Orleans. Armstrong has a number of photographs in his notes showing the Bronx Zoo from a picture from different angles with Oswald not in it, and it's definitely the Bronx Zoo, not New Orleans. There was some speculation that photograph might have actually been taken in New Orleans. But back to Mr. Victor J. Connell. This name is only mentioned once or twice. Armstrong made a big deal of it, but it wasn't that big a deal. The thing he made a big deal about was that he was from the 22nd District and that James Brennan, was the attendance officer from the 24th District, right? So he kind of made a big deal of that for no reason. It was just chance that Victor J. Connell happened to pick up Oswald that day at the Bronx Zoo and return him home. But what happens is on the 16th, right? So I have let me start over. I have a newspaper article here and I'll read it. This is the verification that Armstrong was not full of shit, okay? So he made the claim that policewoman Felicia Spritzer of the Youth Division of the 48th Detective Squad, a Brooklyn division actually, was the one who had arrested Oswald, and his assertion was incorrect. It turns out that Oswald was actually arrested at his home at 825 East 179th Street, April 16th, 1953, at 8:15 a.m. And he was arrested by Patrolman Hennig, Hennig, shield number 3962, from the West Side Command number 1. The name of the complainant was James Brennan, which is he's the attendance officer. So how this kind of went down is that you have multiple layers of authority here, right? Because you have the school board, and they have their own attendance officers, which is James Brennan. And then James Brennan would be in contact with the state because if a kid doesn't go to school, it's criminal, right? And so he would be in touch with John Caro, who was the probation officer. And John Caro was the one who made contact with the family, and he was the one who basically handled Oswald's case at the state level. So what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at here is that we have Oswald documented as having been arrested at his home 8:15 in the morning on April the 16th, 1953. The charge is juvenile delinquency, and specific offense for the warrant was habitual truancy. The judge is Delaney. And it was children's court, and the warrant was signed off on March 11th. Okay, so he's picked up on April the 16th. So this is pretty rock solid, okay? I don't know why other Kennedy researchers couldn't verify this information. Hell, some of these documents I found, actually some of these I found at Mary Farrell. Other ones I found within Armstrong's own document collection. But here's what the problem is. The problem is that Armstrong made the assertion that Oswald had actually been arrested on the 15th of April, the day before that, and was in Judge Delaney's courtroom, and on the 15th was found guilty of being a habitual truant. Now, some might look, let me find this goddamn thing. I've got the actual paperwork here, and I can tell this is why there's been some confusion over this. The document itself was kind of cut in half. I don't know how to say this. The document, you can tell there's a black line through the middle of it, right? The upper half is the signing off of the warrant information on March 11th by John Caro. And then the conviction on April 15th is signed off by Judge Delaney. And it says clearly that Oswald was in court, that he had appeared in court. I'm trying to find this note real quick so I can give you the specifics on it. I thought I had inserted it into my slide presentation, but if not, I got it somewhere else. Give me just 1 second to dig this up. All right, here we go. So we have, this is what the petition says. It says, the foregoing petition having been duly filed with this court and the persons therein named having been appeared in the court being satisfied upon examination of the petition and the evidence witness produced that the main child was under the age of 16 years when the right action in this proceeding accrued. So let me reread that. The foregoing petition having been duly filed with this court, okay, and the persons therein named having appeared, okay, so that's Oswald, and the court being satisfied upon examination of the petition and the evidence and witnesses produced, so there was a trial held, that said child was under the age of 16 years when the right action in this proceeding occurred, that the petition comes within the provinces of Chapter 482 of the laws of 1933 of the state of New York and acts amendatory thereto, and that the material allegations of the petition have been sufficiently established. It is ordered and adjudged by the court that the said child, Lee Harvey Oswald, is a school truant, dated this 15th day of April, 1953, signed Hubert Delaney. So this is where the problem lies. And Armstrong got this correct. He didn't get the part about Felicia Spritzer correct. I don't know how she got named in the story that he came across, but basically what he says in Harvey and Lee is that reporters actually found that information connecting policewoman Spritzer to the case by actually going to the police department and going through the records. They were allowed to go through the records there themselves, or somebody assisted them, I'm sure. But that's allegedly where this was found. And it seems that this is substantiated in that article, right? So in the article that I just cited about policewoman Spritzer, It says the case was handled by policewoman Felisa Spritzer of the Youth Division, who expressed surprise when informed of it today. When I heard that Oswald had been through the Bronx Children's Court, it crossed my mind that I might have had the case, but I don't remember it at all, she said. I doubted at this point if I had any contact with Oswald. I usually am able to remember the kids that I saw more than once. And then the article continues. Time gaps. Complicating the puzzle of Oswald's court entanglement were unexplained time gaps. His records at Junior High School 44 end in January of 1953, 4 months before he was picked up as a truant. Okay, so here's another problem. This article, which is called Seek Data on Oswald in Bronx by Cyril Egan Jr., Cyril Egan, E-G-A-N, Jr., I'm sure you could find this if you just Googled the article, Seek Data on Oswald in Bronx. All of his dates that he has here are shifted by a year from the official story. Isn't that fucking weird? Isn't that weird? So it says here, and the court case was not marked discharge until nearly a year later, on March 11th, 1954, many months after Oswald and his mother had already left the city for New Orleans. The discharge was made by Judge Hubert T. Delaney, one of the 4 jurists who okayed Oswald's release despite the unfavorable psychiatric finding. You know, it's funny because you have multiple interviews with Oswald here. You've got Milton Curian. You've got Renatus Hartogs. You've got Irving Sokolow. And then you have a woman, a social services worker by the name of Evelyn Strickman. And then you have a social worker by the name of William Grote. Those are the main players in this Oswald story. Ah, fuck. It looks like we're not getting to Lillian Moret's testimony. We're just going to rock and roll with Oswald's timeline in New York. I forgot. This is what I did 2 days ago. I spent the whole fucking day organizing this. It was neurotic. It took me like 14 hours. But Oswald's New York timeline. I fucking might as well go through this. Attendance officer is start off with Mr. Keating. I'm sure no relation to the Keatings down in New Orleans. James Brennan, 24th District, case number 23979. And then Victor Connell, as I already discussed, 22nd District. New York probation officer is John Caro. Social workers Evelyn Strickman and William Grote. And the magistrates are Delaney, Fogarty, Sicher, S-I-C-H-E-R. And there's one more whose name I can't recall that I have to look up for my notes. Schools mentioned. Trinity Lutheran, which is allegedly where Oswald went when he first got to town, but it's looking like that's where Harvey Oswald went, while Lee Oswald got enrolled in a school in Manhattan, as per John Pick. That's how that's panning out. Okay. After that, you have PS 117, where Oswald basically never showed up. Then you have PS 44 in the Bronx, which, you know, if you read the notes of John Caro, he didn't go to PS 44. He went to PS 47. There's one sentence that basically says he got enrolled at PS 47 and never showed up. Right? So, PS 47 is a school for the deaf. When you go through these notes of Oswald's time at Youth House, and this, especially the notes by Evelyn Strickman, it becomes pretty freaking obvious Oswald had a hearing problem in his left ear. That's what it appears. It appears that Oswald had a hearing problem in his left ear because of the 1946 mastoidectomy that he had. Imagine you're the CIA or Naval Intelligence or James Angleton, his goddamn self, and you're running an experiment with this child. 46 would have been way past the point that this thing started. He would have been 7. And therefore, the thing was well underway because we'd have been past the Benbrook Common School incident, which would have been he was supposed to be enrolled there starting late October. And he was pulled out of school in April, and he had his mastoidectomy that February for 1946. So, what does that mean? And that means that the person they're talking about who has a hearing problem is most likely Lee Oswald, not Harvey Oswald. Harvey Oswald was up at Lutheran, then PS 117, where he never showed up. Then Lee was probably at PS 47. And it said at PS 47 he was absent 46 days or 47 days. So he didn't even go there. He just didn't even show up. Then we have Robert Oswald's book where he said after the summer, Mother wanted Lee to have a fresh start. So that's when they moved into the apartment on 179th. And Lee allegedly started at PS 44 in Manhattan. And here's the deal. I had noticed one notation in the school records that indicates that when in September of 1953, when Lee starts at PS 44, which is supposed to be in the Bronx, guess what address is on the paperwork? Take a guess what address is on the paperwork for Lee Harvey Oswald at PS 44. It's the address at John Pick's place in Manhattan. I think it's on 92nd Avenue. John Pick's address is on the paperwork for Lee's attendance at PS 44. Okay? That makes no sense if it's in the Bronx. But it makes all the sense in the world if it's in Manhattan. So what evidence do we have that Oswald went to PS 44 in Manhattan starting September of 1953, not returning and resuming school and PS 44 at the Bronx, which he missed most of the school year. And so they just kind of passed him. He went from 7th grade to the 8th grade and they just passed him. Half his grades were failing, but they just passed him. It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, starting March, in late March, Lee doesn't miss any school. He's at PS 44 in the Bronx all the way till the end of the semester. And then I'm alleging that it was PS 44 the entire September semester, 1953, that Lee Oswald was there, while Harvey Oswald was first in North Dakota and then in New Orleans, which is all starting to make perfect sense to me. Not North Dakota so much, but the time frame, the timeline of the duplicity in New Orleans starting in January 94 is starting to make sense. But I'll get to that here in a second. I'm getting off track. So back to the schools mentioned, Trinity Lutheran, and then you have 117, 44 in the Bronx. 47 is a school for the deaf, which the only mentions we have there is that PS 44, while he's attending there, I believe around April, so it would have been before that semester that he would have been in PS 44 Manhattan, there are requests from PS 44 to PS 47 for him to be tested to go to school there to see if he's had a hearing problem, right? Because there's all kinds of indications over this paperwork that says he does have a documented hearing problem because of this mastoidectomy. So that needs some clarification. Whether or not he attended PS 47 and missed a whole bunch of days, or if that's just John Caro making a mistake. But if we just looked at all these different mistakes as just mistakes, then we got to look at every single person involved in the Kennedy assassination. Just makes a whole lot of fucking mistakes, right? So I don't buy that for a split second. So then we have PS 611. There's a small note card from a PS 611 that shows that Lee attended PS 611 in New York, and that he was showing that he was adapting fairly well. He wasn't really integrating with other students, but he wasn't really causing a problem. He was just kind of a laid back. And this appears to have been Harvey Oswald, not Lee Oswald. So PS 611, as it turns out, was a very small school within the youth house. So if you were taken out of school, like Lee, apparently, they say he was taken out of school and then put into the youth house. So you don't miss, the curriculum you are taught at PS 611, right? So you don't fall behind when you go back to your normal school or something along those lines. So PS 611 is an actual small school within youth house. But it's weird because when I looked up PS 611, I found an article about this long-term, lifelong military guy who in 1947 or 1948 was made the principal at PS 611, right? So why is there a military guy, a lifelong military guy, being the principal at this small school that had no more than 30 or 40 kids? What's the fucking deal here? Okay, so but youth house, it seems as though there's a youth house down at 12th and 3rd, down in Manhattan, southern Manhattan. But when you read through the FBI report, so The FBI was given the school records by Judge Florence, whatever the fuck her name was, who was actually unimportant in the story. They make a big deal of her in the newspapers, but she was really rather unimportant. When the FBI gets the reports from her, they read through the reports and then they type their own report. So we don't see the original report that they looked at. All we can see is the FBI's interpretation of that report. And it says clear as day that Lee Oswald on the 16th, when he's arrested and brought before Judge Delaney, that he is sent to the Spofford Youth House. Okay, I talked about this before a little bit. The Spofford Youth House is way up in the Bronx, right? But we have more than ample confirmation that Oswald was not at Spofford Youth House. There's no documentation on Spofford Youth House other than this one line in the FBI report that says the reports that they read said that Oswald was sent there. But when you're looking at the reports of, I don't know so much about Renatus Hartogs. Renatus Hartogs appears to be in with the CIA or somebody on this. He seems to be connected to MK Ultra. There's some rumblings about that, but he's the only one. Everyone who interviewed Oswald said he's a likable kid, but he's very withdrawn. But Renatus Hartogs is like, this guy's a psychopath. He needs to be put in an institution, right? So what does that tell you? He tried to funnel him into an institution, and that's exactly what Renatus Hartogs tried to do. So to me, when I look at the Renatus Hartogs interview, I'm like, this guy's kind of full of shit. And I believe Renatus Hartogs would have been the one who would have sent Oswald to the youth house at Spofford. Now, here's the deal with Spofford. Spofford did not become the official youth house until 1957, several years later. But in 1953, it was open, it was operating, and it was mostly a youth house for girls, right? It had less than 100 juveniles there. And from what I've read, it was where they would send, it was in its infancy. It was a very small facility, and they didn't have a lot of resources, but it was where they would send juvenile delinquent females. I'm kind of, in the back of my head, I'm thinking that I read some indications that there were other things going on there, but it wasn't expanded to the full youth house until they shut down the Southern Youth House, and this opened in 1957. What does that tell you? Or what does it tell me, at least, in my paranoid fucking ass? It tells me that Renatus Hartogs, the only guy who thinks that Oswald's a psychopath and needs the fucking psychological counseling, wants to send him to a fucking facility that's not really an official facility until 1957. It sounds like a CIA black site, doesn't it? Under the cover of a girls' youth house, right? That's what it sounds like to me. So what I'm kind of starting to deduct is that both of the Oswalds ended up getting picked up. One on the 15th, as is proven by Judge Delaney's paperwork, where that youth who was Harvey Oswald was then sent to youth house down on 12th and 3rd, whereas the next day on the 16th, it was Lee Oswald who was picked up, brought in before a different judge, or maybe the same judge. Maybe the same judge is in on this. Who knows? But at that point, Lee Oswald is then sent to Spofford Youth House. That's kind of what I'm deducing from this. And the funny thing is, the document that Armstrong mentioned, that I just covered here, see if I can't find it again. This document basically it's basically the proof that we have Oswald being adjudicated as school truant on April 15th. And the thing that got me about this document is that it says right here, the foregoing petition having been duly filed with this court and the persons therein named having appeared. That's the catch line right there. And the persons therein named having appeared. Okay? They appeared on the 15th, just like this document says. But this document is only the bottom half of the document. The top half is attached to the same bottom half section of the March 11th warrant filled out by John Caro. Okay, so that's the problem there. This document has obviously been obfuscated. It appears that the top was cut off and that a different top was attached to it. And I say that because of the distinct black line that runs above this section of the document. And the fact that there should be multiple other pages with headings, with dates, times, official stamps, who the court reporter was, all that stuff. All that's missing. None of that's fucking here at all. All we have is the bottom section with the clearly handwritten date by Hubert Delaney on April the 15th that Oswald was adjudicated as a truant. So, what does this mean? There's a lot of holes here, right? There's a lot of gray area here, and I don't expect to be able to come up with all the answers, and there's going to be a lot of contradiction. And so, when I see things like this, and I see the possibility, and see, I don't think that Delaney was the judge on the 16th. I haven't had the time to go back through and look and double check, but it would make sense to me if it was a different judge on the 16th, because then it would make sense that you could get away with this. Otherwise, Delaney is in on the setup. Right? Which I still don't understand to this day. But I still don't understand how the fuck intelligence gets their tentacles into everything. You know? But yes, so fucking, once again, Armstrong does it. He got the Spitzer part wrong, but he got everything else right. The contradiction is there. Not only that, on the Irving Sokolow report of Oswald that says Oswald's a great kid, he's just quiet and withdrawn, that says that Oswald was admitted on the 10th. So here we have more contradiction in the documents. Oswald admitted to Youth House on the 10th, but then deemed guilty and adjudicated on the 15th as a truant and sent to Youth House, but then on the 16th sent to Youth House. So what the fuck? There's a problem here. You see that? We have 3 dates that Oswald was admitted to Youth House: the 10th, the 15th, and the 16th. Please make it make sense. Please. The best that I can come up with is that Sokolow read the date wrong when he on the intake form, and when he actually fucking filled out his paperwork, he wrote the 10th, because sometimes 6s and 0s can look alike. That is and I'm speculating here. That's the only thing that I can even begin to think of that would justify the idea that there was a third date involved here, because there shouldn't be. The 15th and 16th are good enough to show that there's a conflict. We don't need that third date of the 10th. So why the fuck do we have that date of the 10th here? I do not know. So Oswald's timeline, October 53. Let's start in October of 53. He's present. Hang on a second. Do I have any? No, actually, let me go way before that. August 1952. Marguerite and Lee Oswald arrive in New York, and they stay at John Pick's at 325 East 92nd Avenue. Okay. September 8th to the 26th, 1952, Oswald attends the Trinity Lutheran School, and he's in the 7th grade. This, I believe, there's some issues with. We have John Pick in his Warren Commission testimony testifying that Lee went to a school right up the road, and I have the cross streets here somewhere, but it was not PS 44, which was right up the road that Robert Oswald testified to. It was before all that stuff. And he said that Oswald didn't like to go there because he had to go to school with Negroes. You goddamn racist. So it appears that there's more conflict here. It appears that Harvey Oswald, with his mother, went to Trinity Lutheran School from September 8th to the 26th, while Lee Oswald, who had been to John Pick's apartment, attended this other school in Manhattan during this same time period that there's zero documentation on. Nobody even infers that there's another school, but there fucking 100% has to be this other school because it's referenced by John Pick. Not only that, there are references to John Pick visiting Marguerite and Lee at their apartment in Manhattan when they move out in September-ish of 1952. That is not the 1455 Sherwood Avenue address, which is in the Bronx. All the addresses we have for them are in the Bronx, but we have John Pick's testimony that Lee went to school after he left his apartment. He went to school right up the road from him in Manhattan, and they had an apartment right up the road from him. So we have a big void there, and we have an obvious contradiction. Okay? And considering that John Pick is not in on the scheme, and he's not associated with Harvey Oswald at all until Thanksgiving 1962, when he says, "That's not my fucking brother," to the Warren Commission. Since John Pick is not in on any of this, we can rest assured all the things that John Pick is saying is about Lee Oswald, while Harvey Oswald and the false Marguerite are up in the Bronx. That's exactly what I'm gathering. September 30th, it would have been Harvey Oswald starts PS 117, 7th grade. October 1st, 1952, Oswald supposedly begins PS-117, Class 710, but is truant. So yeah, there's a conflict here again. I have two different dates, September 30th and October 1st. Maybe he registered on one, but was supposed to start on the other. But these are the two dates I have, September 30th and October 1st. Misses 46 and 2 half days, and he's only present for 15 days. January 1953, he's referred to the Salvation Army. We have some conflict in some stuff. You'll catch it as I did after I made this list. January 53, referred to Salvation Army by the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies. On January 13th, 1953, District 24 hearing on Oswald. And at the time, Oswald's address is 1455 Sheridan Avenue. January, let's just see if you can count the contradictions here as I go through this list. January 14th, 1953, Oswald's moved to 825 East 179th Street in the Bronx, and this is going to stay with them for they'll live there for the next year until they leave. Actually, it's exactly a year. That's probably why they left when they did, was because the lease was up. January 15th, first day Oswald was supposed to attend PS 44 in the Bronx, but he failed to register. Okay, never attended. Like, zero, didn't attend. Like, this is what I'm getting from this PS 44 in the Bronx, is that nobody ever went there. And when you look at the timing of when he did go back in May, that would kind of align with the entrance into PS 47. But then we have the contradiction there again, because he's supposed to have missed the 46 and 2 half days at the time. But then that was at PS 117, right? You see how these fucking records are all jumbled and overlapped, and you were fed a nonstop stream of conflicting information, which has to be somewhat on purpose. All right. So January 16th, the Community Service Society, which will be referred to as CSS, case number 219065, Marguerite called seeking the assistance of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies. So she's been in contact with them before, contacting them again for help on January 16th. January 16th, the same date, Oswald's supposed to start PS 44 in the Bronx. Doesn't show. January 23rd, 53, CSS contacted PS 117 to find out the boy's new school. So by the 23rd of January, he's out of PS 117, having missed 46 days. January 27th, there's a hearing for Oswald, his case number 60, address that he's living at, 825 East 179th. His probation, they don't show. His probation is adjudicated to June 20th, 1953, District 24. January 30th, 1953, appointment scheduled with CSS, but Mrs. Oswald didn't show up, and CSS closed out the case. This is all the beginning of, remember, this is January 30th of 53. So all the problems that kicked off, all the missing school and the truancy that kicked this off for Oswald began really between October and December of 52. That's what started all the problems. Then there's really no consistency in Oswald going to school until the end of March, but I think we're coming up on that. So January 27th is the hearing. January 30th is an appointment scheduled with CSS, but Mrs. Oswald didn't show up and the case was closed. March 11th is the next date that I have, which is funny because I don't have anything in February of 53. So that's weird that there's just a missing month here because everything else is jam-packed. So let me look into February of 53 and what was going on there. March 11th, Brennan fills out the warrant for Oswald. Excessive absences at PS 117. He refused to register at PS 44. He was present 16 days, absent 46 days. At this time, Marguerite is working at Martin's department store in Brooklyn, which is fucking weird because the Bronx is far as fuck from Brooklyn. You're looking at like, goddamn, back then if she's taking the train or however the fuck, you're looking at like a 2-hour transport to and from work every day. If you believe she's working at Martin's department store. That becomes the kicker for me. If she's working for Martin's department store. You see, I don't know. There's something up with the... Like, I'm sold beyond all selling that Marguerite Oswald was in New York from 41 to 44. even though we have some activity of her going on down in New Orleans, and we have some alleged job activity, but that job activity was from a company that also operated in New York that happened to open a store in New Orleans. And so I don't really buy this official story that she was working out of fucking New Orleans operating a store, when that store is also in New York, when she went back to New York and got a job there again, or referred by the guy who owned that. It was the Oris Hosiery. It does, no, I'm sorry. When things are too convenient, they're just not that convenient ever. So there's too much smoke there to not be any fire. So then on March 12th, the Magister Delaney signs off on the warrant for Lee, and their attempt to execute will be on the 19th, which means they went to the apartment on the 19th, and they were unable to execute the warrant. Okay, so March 23rd, 1953. This is where things, for me, really become super interesting, because Oswald enters PS 44 in the Bronx, and he has a positive attendance record between March 23rd and the end of school, which is usually the first week of June or something like that. But he's in the 7th grade. He finishes the 7th grade. They pass him in the 7th grade, which is crazy if he missed so many fucking days, right? And then he failed half the classes. So how are they going to pass this guy to the 8th grade if he's in the 7th grade? And please let it be noted, the FBI report of their interpretation of the school records that we have the copies here, I believe. We have them. I think they're not hidden anymore. It's a psychiatric report and a couple other things, and a timeline by Caro. But when you look at that, the FBI clearly indicated that he maintained a positive attendance record all the way throughout the rest of the year, and that he was in the 7th grade, but that in the FBI report, it said that he was in the 9th grade, which is, again, weird. Because he wouldn't have been in the 9th grade. If he would have moved to the next, he would have been in the 8th grade, right? If he would have gone in September, he starts the 8th grade, right? And I'm saying it was at PS 44 in Manhattan, as per the statements of Robert Oswald, and the fact that on the paperwork was John Pick's address, right? So you can't use a Manhattan address and go to school in the Bronx. It doesn't work that way. John Pick was in the same district as PS 44 Manhattan, right? So that's why I'm pretty convinced that the fall semester stuff was all at PS 44 Manhattan, and that PS 44 in the Bronx was barely attended. It was mostly attended from March until June-ish, right? But then he's moved and he starts the 8th grade. Or is there a difference? Are one of these Oswalds a year ahead of the other? It seems to balance out when they get back to New Orleans in 54. But I think I lost my point there somewhere, but let me continue on. On March 24th, 1953, Form 408 by James Brennan reports indicated that Oswald was a truant, and it says, on 2 different lines, it says for psychological study, and then it says, under that, it says arrest attending. So Brennan is wanting this guy sent to a residential facility. Brennan's pushing for that the whole time. He seems to be a gung-ho, young, early 20-something probation officer who wants to lock up everybody. That seems to be what I get from him. And Brennan is basing his reports on the information that came from Renatus Hartogs. So let me continue. This is where the problem, really, one of the problems lies. I already talked about Irving Sokolow report indicated April 10th as the date Oswald was admitted. And that would make that he was admitted to Youth House 3 times instead of the twice that we have on the 15th and 16th. Therefore, I'm more inclined to believe that this April 10th, 1953 date is more of a error on the part of Sokolow. But hey, then again, is everybody making mistakes? Who the fuck knows? Nonetheless, we have 2 different reports, one of Sokolow and one of the FBI acknowledging Sokolow's report. Both of them say April 10th, Oswald was admitted. So was he admitted? I have no other indications that he was. Then we have April 15th is the report that I just read. And April 16th, Oswald's remanded again. April 17th, Irving Sokolow interviews Oswald, described him as a 13-year-old, well-built boy that has superior mental resources. 13-year-old boy is well-built and he has superior mental resources. That's clearly Lee Oswald. April 21st, Marguerite Oswald is interviewed by the office of James Brennan. She provides a whole bunch of false names and stuff. She says the father of her child is James John. She says it's Robert Lee Harvey. She says the father of her child is Robert Lee Harvey. And she says that they got married in 1929. Both of those are false. The information she provides is all wrong. Is it intentionally wrong, or is it wrong because she doesn't know because she's the imposter? This is where shit gets really fucked up. Because when you start looking into, I found another document from Lillian Moret, where Lillian Moret, it was travel documents where she provided information on her parents, and she provided all wrong birth dates and shit. I mean, like, so was someone impersonating her, or was putting wrong information on these official forms? Is this like a CIA training tactic? Right? Is this a tactic that intelligence people use? Putting your birth date and all this stuff just off by a little bit. I mean, is that an intentional CIA training tactic that they want people to use, or do these people not really know the information because they're doubles? I mean, you'd think that a double would be mandated to memorize things to the utmost. You know what I mean? So, let me move on. April the 23rd, 1953, Oswald interviewed by P.O. John Caro. Caro's report says the boy attended Protestant parochial school, then transferred to PS 117. At PS 47, which is the hearing impaired school, the boy had attendance of being absent 48 whole days and 2 half days from October 1st, 1952 to January 15th, 1953. The boy is transferred at that time to PS 44, but refused to attend. Let me reread this because this is what John Caro wrote in his report. And let's see if we can't decipher what he really meant. Caro's report says the boy attended Protestant parochial school. Okay, so is that Trinity Lutheran? Are Lutherans and Protestants the same fucking thing? I don't fucking know. I'm not either one of them. But Protestant parochial school, I don't know if that's the Lutheran Trinity, because that's where he's alleged to have gone, Lutheran Trinity. And then from Lutheran Trinity, transferred to PS 117. It's allegedly at PS 117 where he's absent for 48 days. But then it says he then transferred to PS 117. And then at PS 47, the boy had attendance of being absent 48 whole days and 2 half days. From October 1st, 1952 to January 15th, 1953. The boy is transferred at that time to PS 44, which lines up with the real official record, but refused to attend. That would be PS 44 in the Bronx. So what is he saying here? He's saying that Oswald went to Protestant parochial school, then transferred to PS 117, never showed up at PS 117, or did he? It says, the official story says he was present 16 days and absent 46. But then that next sentence, PS 47, the boy had attendance of being absent 48 whole days and 2 half days. From October 1st to January 15th. So maybe he did go from Protestant parochial to, hold on a second. Maybe this is an inadvertent merging of these records, right? Maybe Protestant parochial school is where Oswald went in Manhattan, while Harvey went to Trinity in the Bronx. And then after Trinity, he transferred to PS 117, while Lee Oswald transferred to PS 47. There he had an attendance record of missing 48 days as alleged, compared to the missing 44 days by Harvey Oswald at PS 117. This would make sense, right? This would perfectly make sense. And this would indicate both of their records, and it would account for how there's goddamn 10 schools on their fucking record in like this short amount of time. And this is from October 1st, 52 to January 15th. And then from at this point, the boy transferred to PS 44. That would line up perfectly with when he was supposed to have attended PS 44, but he refused to register, right? Didn't register there. This would make sense. And the PS47 thing, everything that I just said makes perfect sense from a speculative point of view. Okay, because that's all we got on this. We don't really have much more. We're never gonna have much more. April 23rd, 53. Miss Strickman, it's Evelyn Strickman Youth House, contacted CSS for Lee's summary. Says Lee is skitsy. Case indicated is number 26996. April 28th, 53, PS 611, school report for Lee Oswald. Says Oswald is adjusting nicely. PS 611, like I said, is the one within Youth House, down on 12th. April 29th, 1963, Department of Corrections calls the Youth House for information on Lee. April 30th, 1953, Evelyn Strickman. Her report says Lee is completely withdrawn at the Youth House. May 1st, 53, Renatus Hartogs interviewed Oswald, and he was emphatic that Oswald needed to be put in a residential facility as a schizoid personality. That's very contradictory to what everyone else is saying about him. Except for Evelyn Strickman, who says he's skitsy, which I don't know what skitsy means. May 7th, left Youth House, returned to PS 44, allegedly the one in the Bronx, and the report is showing he has an IQ of 118. He's given another IQ test along the way somewhere here. I haven't put it in my notes yet, but it was scored at 103. It's a big difference between 118 and 103, indicating two different people. May 7th, Oswald, his address is 825 East 179th. He's in court. He's before Magistrate McClancy. And James Brennan is there. And his case is now adjudicated. He is paroled until September 24th, meaning they let him out of Youth House, but he's on probation, basically, till September 24th. And the case is then referred to the Community Service Society. But remember, CSS has already been involved, and they wouldn't work with him. The Board of Education case document has another case number, and it's kind of obfuscated, but what I could get out of it was 1086, and the last number was obfuscated, which is different from the three other fucking case numbers we seem to have for Oswald. May 11th, 53, an exam is requested by principal at PS 44. What he's talking about here is a special examination, and it's actually on a May 13th report. Special examination report says history of left mastoid with impaired hearing left ear. May 13th, 1953, Caro talked with intake officer at CSS and told Oswald was unable to be placed there. Then on May 15th, 1953, Oswald was examined. There was a medical report saying he has a history of left mastoid operation and a loss of hearing. This would account for a lot of Oswald's being withdrawn and not wanting to interact with a lot of other people. Not that he's a violent, crazy person, but that he had a loss of hearing, which made him feel isolated. That's why he wanted to be alone all the time. We never hear about that. But it obviously wasn't enough to affect his speech, although we've never heard Oswald's voice. We've never heard Lee Oswald's voice, ever. The only voice we've ever heard is Harvey Oswald. So who knows if the fucking hearing left. I've never read anything about him having a speech impediment or anything like that. Because when you're deaf, your intonation goes off, right? And even if he's only partially deaf, it would have some kind of effect on his speech. These guys would have sounded nothing alike. May 18th, it says teacher will arrange for exam at PS 47 for the learning impaired, report says. Now, does this May 18th date, does this line up with Oswald being at a school where he missed a bunch of days? It's possible. It's possible here, but that would cause a separation again. Because starting in March of 53, Oswald had a great record at school. And that's another weird thing. There's days where there's like warrants issued and they're out looking for Oswald and they can't find him. But the official record shows that he is supposed to be at PS 44 in the Bronx with a really good record starting at the end of March. So which is it? Is he a fucking truant, needs to go to Youth House? Or starting in March, does he have a great record? You see, there's so much contradiction over this New York school record stuff, and I'm very slowly detangling it, but it's a bitch, man. Fuck. And there's a ton of missing documents here. I'm just telling you right now, there's a ton more missing documents of Oswald's time in New York. Tons. And all kinds of missing documents on Marguerite's employment stuff. That's why her employment shit is so important. So on May 18th, 53, after Oswald's at a youth house, it says teacher will arrange for the exam at PS 47 for the learning impaired. So at the time, it probably had more than just people with hearing impairments were probably considered learning impaired at the time. And then May 31st, CSS closed the file on Oswald. They couldn't offer him any help. So in May of 53, Oswald's present 14 and 1/2 days, and he's only absent 1.5 days. The other days that he's not there in the month of May could be accounted for him being at Youth House and PS 611. All right, so June 4th, 1953, P.O. John Caro contacted Mr. Wilcox with the Salvation Army for a possible reference. You wanted to send him to go to a residential facility at Salvation Army. June 53, Oswald's present 13 and 8/2 days, and he's absent 1 and 8/2 days. So he went home early a bunch of days. Then we have, around this time, summer 1953, starting July, I believe, July, August, and possibly early September, Oswald in Stanley, North Dakota. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm gathering. Harvey Oswald gets in all this trouble. He's in the youth house, and as soon as he gets out of the youth house, they're like, get the fuck out of town. And so then they get the fuck out of town. And the rest of the time, from this time, September 3rd-ish, all the way through January, you have Lee Oswald still in New York, going to PS 44 in Manhattan, where he has a good attendance record. But yet, they're still chasing Oswald from his poor attendance record from the Bronx, right? You see what they did here? So this is why they eventually had to get the fuck out of New York, because they were going to realize, everyone was going to realize what the fuck was happening, and that the people showing up in courts with some judges was not the same Lee Oswald showing up with other judges. This required coordination in New York by someone at an extremely high level within the intelligence community, and this could possibly coordinate. This could possibly line up with the notes in George White's diaries that he had meetings with Lee at the fucking Museum of Natural History, right? So could have George White been directly hands-on involved with this stuff going on in New York at the time? You motherfucking bet your ass it's possible. To Jake Ehrlich out there, Jake Ehrlich III, if you're listening, hit me up again. We haven't talked in a while. I'd like to. He was working on a book on George White and his role in the Kennedy assassination, which I didn't personally agree with. But if you're out there, Jake, hit me up. We haven't talked in a while. I want to see how you're doing. All right, let me move on. September 3rd, materials forwarded to the Salvation Army. Oh, yeah, so in a nutshell, you got Lee Oswald, who's doing good in school, going to school all the time, and he's being chased by the school who was dealing with Harvey Oswald in the Bronx, who wasn't going all the time, right? So this is the fucking problem that we have here, right? September 8th, Salvation Army returned the paperwork rejecting Oswald, citing his psych report. September 13th, 1953, Oswald is now in the 8th grade at PS 44. I'm claiming it's in Manhattan. This official story says it's in the Bronx. September 24th, 1953. And remember, the other Oswald, Harvey Oswald's out of the picture at this point. Mrs. Oswald called John Caro, said there's no need to appear in court. Oswald's been attending school. The report says Oswald's in the 9th grade, but he can't be in the 9th grade, can he? The school had 9th grade, but Oswald should only be in the 8th grade at this point. Oswald attending PS 44, and allegedly, according to Marguerite Oswald, he was the class president, which makes no sense at all. Court was held. Oswald didn't show. Parole was continued to 10/29/53. Remember, here now it's October. Oswald's been in school for 6 months, attending with no problems. But they're still chasing Harvey Oswald, who has been ditching court and not going because he was ditching in the Bronx. September 53, Oswald present 11 and 2/2 days and absent 2/2 days. What the fuck? Did they not go to school very often back then or what? But you'll see his attending is positive. It's not negative. So October 16th, request for records from PS 44. Report dated October 16th. Oswald's in the 8th grade. Remember, the address on the records for PS 44 at this time, September of 53, October, is in Manhattan, John Pick's address. October 21st, progress report received by Mr. Caro. Attendance good, attitude poor, behavior poor. Report indicated Oswald's in the 8th grade. address 825 East 179th Street. This is when they're saying Oswald refused to stand and salute the flag and stuff like that. October 29th, 53, court scheduled. Mrs. Oswald called Caro, said said she would not be there. Judge Sitcher is now presiding. Oswald's no-show continued to November 19th, 1953. Case referred to Children's Village, P.O. Nielsen. The probation officer Nielsen appeared. So, when you don't show up for court, they issue a warrant. There's no documentation on any new warrants being issued for Oswald at this time. But why don't they just go to PS44 and pick the fucking guy up? I'll tell you why. Because he's not there. They're thinking he's supposed to be at PS44 in the Bronx, and he's not. And they're like, we can't go pick him up because he's not at school. And he's not showing up. See, all the records and stuff we get long after the fact, right? So they don't know this at the time. But Oswald's going almost every day to PS44 in Manhattan. That's how this had to have gone. There's no other way around it. October 53, Oswald's present 9 and 2 half days, and he's only absent 1 day. What the fuck? Present 9 days? There's a minimum of 20 days in a school month, right? 5, 10, 15, 20. Minimum. Present 9 and 2 half days, and he's absent 1 and 1/2 day. That's a positive attendance record, but where's the other days in the month? November 13th, 53, letter from Ruth Thompson of the Bureau of Social Service and Children's Aid rejecting Oswald from Harriman. That must have been a residential facility. Advised he should go to St. Christopher's because of his, quote, superior mental endowment. Interesting. November 13th, 53, school medical notes says something about hearing. Can't really read it, it's obfuscated, but it says something about his hearing. November 19th, 1953, progress report shows great improvement. November 19th, 1953, same day, notice of appearance signed by Marge Oswald's lawyer, Horton H. Nielsen. It's weird, we got two Hortons involved, Horton Nielsen and Horton Delaney. You don't meet many Hortons these days. So, Marguerite Oswald, who's broke, right? She cries broke all the time, but she can hire a housekeeper during the summer and hires a fucking lawyer, Horton H. Nielsen, up in New York. Hires him to represent her before all this court shit. Never ends up actually going anywhere. November 28th, 53. I'd like to see how she was referred to him, though. November 28th, 53, Oswald is referred to the Protestant Big Brother Agency. December 1st, 53, John Caro contacts Big Brother. Big Brother initially has their initial phone contact with Marguerite on that date. December 15th, Big Brother Agency has their first of 3 visits to the Oswald home. No one is there. And I believe a card is left on the door. Other contacts include December 17th, December 23rd, January 4th, 5th, 6th, January 10th. There's obviously nobody home on those dates. December 17th, oh, God damn it, how did I overlook this? If they went there on the 4th, 5th, 6th, and the 10th, and there was nobody there, it means they were probably not there. They probably had left prior to all these dates. And because it just hit me that all the contacts made with Oswald that last week that they were allegedly there were all done by phone. So, who knows? Not overly important, I don't think. Well, actually, I would say it is important. Well, actually, no, because this is Lee Oswald and his mother, and Harvey Oswald will be down in New Orleans back at a 126 Exchange Place starting January 1st, believe it or not. So December 17th, Marguerite Oswald contacts Big Brother per the card on the door and tells him she doesn't need any help. January 1954, unknown date, Marguerite Oswald writes a letter to the school board saying she's moving to New Orleans. January 4th, Big Brother phones Marge and says she says she needs no help and she's moving to New Orleans. And then on January the 4th, 1954, there's a medical exam at PS44 that indicates, I don't know what this means, but it says TNC, just the letters, and there's a period after each letter. TNC, and seems well noted. So obviously Oswald still was in New York January 4th because he was had a medical exam, and he seems well. January 5th, Marguerite calls the probation officer and talks to a Mr. Dunn. Caro is out of town on vacation. Talks to Mr. Dunn, and he says that she appears cooperative and is willing to come in and talk to them and all this stuff and put Lee in a home, and whatever they want to do, she's willing to do. She's obviously appeasing them because she's out of town within a couple days, and she knows this. January 6th, Big Brother agency, phone call to Oswald home advising that they need to show up in court on January the 11th, 1954. January 10th, 1954, Oswald leaves New York. I thought I placed it a little earlier than this, between the 8th or the 9th, but they have it as the 10th. Nobody really knows, but I'll take their word for it. This is reported by caseworker William E. Grote, Grote. January 11th, Oswald scheduled for court. Obviously, they don't show. January 13th, District 24 hearing. Not a court hearing. This is a school board hearing. It's hearing case 60 concerning Oswald. The address they still have on file for him is at 1455 Sheridan. For some reason, their address hasn't been updated. Mr. Brennan is there, and this is a hearing for the Bureau of Attendance. January 20th, another hearing for case number 60. Also, Oswald's New York City probation is extended to June 30th of 1954, which is weird because they already know that they're out of town. Or are they out of town? All we know is that they stopped answering the phone, they moved out of there, and they told them they were out of town. But then all we know is that Harvey Oswald is at Beauregard, and they're living at 126 Exchange Place, and we don't know where Lee Oswald and his mother are until May, when they show up at the St. Mary's address, right? So this is where shit gets... Well, we'll probably never know where the fuck they were for those 4 or 5 months, but they were somewhere. Both Lee and his mother were gone from January the 10th here all the way up until fucking Lee goes to school in... all the way up until fucking May, when they move into the St. Mary's address, where Lee's a total cunt to his mother, and Julian Evans and his wife, Myrtle, are dealing with them. So that's the real Marguerite, because she knew her for 20 years. And it's the false Marguerite at 126 Exchange Place up until around the time that they need to get out of there in May of 1955. And then they move into 126 Exchange Place, which is weird because now that I think about it, 126 Exchange Place, that means that there's a gap from the time that Lee Oswald goes... Yeah, there's a gap when nobody's living at 126 Exchange Place, and then Lee Oswald and his mother move in there after Harvey and his mother move out. I'm going to have to spend some time looking over that, because I just realized there would be a couple-month gap there, if my thinking is correct, which is weird. Totally fucking weird. So, where am I on this list? All right, Oswald scheduled for court, hearing 60. All right, January 26th, 1954, is a stamp on a letter. Marguerite Oswald sent John Caro a letter saying she was back in New Orleans. January 28th, 54, court is held. It's Justice Polier, Polier, and it's Mrs. Baxter, who is the attendance officer present. She showed the court the letter. The court then rescheduled the hearing to March 11th, 54, because they wanted to verify the story, make sure that Oswald is no longer in New York. And then March 11th of 54, Justice Delaney, it's back in his court. So look at this. We have 4 different justices handling this. It could be pulled off pretty well with minor coordination on the back end to keep the Oswalds in different courts, different hearings, right? Because we had Justice Polier and Justice Delaney. But back on March 11th, 54, we're in Justice Delaney's courtroom, and everyone's a no-show, obviously. John Caro is present, and they discharge the case because Oswald's out of the jurisdiction, and that brings Oswald's New York story to an end. His probation, which had been extended up to June, will stay in place until June 30th, 1954. The probation is terminated. He discharges the case, but the probation stays in place because then there's paperwork in June of 54 showing that was then dismissed then. So, but here's the weird thing. If you're on probation in New York and you go to another fucking state, they're going to call that state and be like, yo, this guy's on probation. You need to go do something. And then that state would go arrest you and put you on probation there. Plain and simple. That's how the fucking law works. So Oswald is protected from the law his whole life. He's protected from the law and his superiors in the Marines. The guy is He is protected, and then thrown under the fucking bus. Fierce. So, but damn. I've been talking a long time. We never got to Lillian Moret. My apologies. And that's going to do it for me today, guys. And I will be back, well, probably tomorrow or the next day. Talk to you guys soon.